Hello, everybody. This is Shannon Fleck with the Oklahoma Conference of Churches, and we're going live right now to talk about the two things that you should never talk about if you want to do so civilly, but we're going to show you exactly how to do it here with a great group of faith leaders from across Oklahoma. We are talking about faith and politics, and as you all know, we are in the thick of the political season. Politics are swirling all around us. We have a big presidential debate happening tonight. So we are leading into that with civil dialogue from a faith lens about politics in this country. And so I want to take the opportunity to introduce our wonderful panelists for this conversation. Father Tim Luschen from St. Charles Borromeo Catholic Church is with us. The Reverend Dr. Diana Davies from First Unitarian Church in Oklahoma City. Dr. Imam Enchassi, a staple here with our panel discussions, it seems. He's with the Islamic Society of Greater Oklahoma City and Oklahoma City University. And the Reverend Jesse Jackson Jr. from East 6th Street Christian Church here in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Thank you all so much for being here, for being willing to engage in this conversation and just participating. I know it's a busy time and busy season for all of us. So let's get started. Let's not waste another moment because we know this is going to be a wonderful conversation. So the first question I have for the panel to consider and discuss is what role do you see faith and your faith tradition playing in politics and political life here in the United States? And let's go ahead and get started with Reverend Davies, if we can. You start us off, ma'am, and let us know.
Sure. Well, as a Unitarian Universalist, it's not even a question whether political and social civic engagement is related to faith. The two are completely interrelated. My favorite 20th century Unitarian theologian, James Luther Adams, once said that a purely spiritual religion is a spurious religion, meaning that if it does not have meaning and relevance in people's lives in this world, it's questionable what its value is. So, we have at core elements of our theology this idea that we need to be working in the here and now, not thinking of some place in the distant future, that we need to be working out of the imperfect present, not thinking about we can't do anything, we have to wait until everything is actually perfect and all of our colleagues are perfect and all of our allies never make mistakes. We've got to use what we have right now. And we absolutely must be engaged socially. To not do so would be to not practice Unitarian Universalism. So to me, it's not even a question. The one relies on the other one.
Father Tim, you want to jump in?
Well, I think similarly, well, a couple of things. First of all, I think some of us are come from backgrounds where dialogue between people with different ideas has been very difficult, and we came from families where maybe one voice was the voice of this is the way it's going to be, and the rest of us got in line. And so when people think of that, their faith in that same way, it's hard then to have civilized debates with other people. But our Catholic social teaching calls us to be involved in the life of the community, and that we are called to bring our rich faith tradition to help form a political system that is just for all of the people who live there, not just people of our faith, and also help people to experience life to the fullest in that community. And so we should be actively promoting that kind of community and using the gifts of our faith to do that.
Nice. Thank you so much. Reverend Jackson, what do you think?
I think you have to be. There was a great quote that Dr. Davies has. I think Dr. King said it this way: some folks are so heavenly bound that they're no earthly good. And if you put all your eggs in the afterlife, you don't do what you need to do here. And so you miss the majority of Jesus's teaching of how to deal with fellow humans and how to deal with all of creation. And I think God has called us to stand up for those who cannot stand themselves and speak up for those who cannot speak themselves. I think we have an obligation to try to make this world a more livable place, a more decent place for everyone. And so our faith should come through in our politics. Not that we're preaching to anybody, but just on a moral level, our politics ought to reflect our religion in that way, in being moral and fair and honest and just.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Imad and Enchassi, you gotta unmute yourself, man.
That's right. That's right. So the very definition of faith, actually, in Arabic, is a verb. We learn to keep faithing. I'm just making my own words up. So when you have a PhD, you tend to make your words up. And a definition from the prophetic tradition about faith. The prophet said, faith is what dwells deep in the heart and is authenticated by good deeds. So being engaged as a people of faith, if we are not the one who are engaged, if we're not the one who are engaged in the community and going out, finding our social relevancy within our community, then who would be doing that? I think the Islam is a religion of practice that leads to faith. And thus, faith, if it stays in the heart, it does not manifest itself into engaging other people towards righteousness, towards doing good, then it's just going to stay there and benefit a person. But when faith manifests itself outside and getting people engaged in the political arena, that is what God called for us to do.
Thank you. And I'm going to stay with you, Dr. Enchassi, for this next question to start us off, because America has been described by many, throughout since the birth of the country as a Christian nation. And, this linking of a nation with a religion is a very interesting concept. But what I'd like to talk about is, how has that affected non-Christians in this country?
Well, you're going to hear a very shocking answer from me. I don't mind a Christian nation, but just show me the Jesus that I know. For the most part, as a person who is not Muslim, as a person who believes in the in their faith deeply, and at the same time in the Constitution. We all are bound by our humanity, one, by our faith, two, and then by a document that we all prescribe to, which is the U.S. Constitution. When the idea of this is a Christian nation becomes excluding others from having a seat at the table, it becomes problematic. We have many mishaps in Oklahoma City and many stories of trying to exclude people of different faith from the table simply because they're not Christian.
Right. Thank you so much. Jesse, what do you think?
Well, I think that just part and parcel of what we have. We have a lying birth narrative in this nation. And we've lied and we've fooled and we've taught that the United States is a Christian nation, as Dr. Enchassi said. That would be great if they demonstrated that. But that has not been demonstrated from the very beginning. I mean, going back, let me just start as a Declaration of Independence. I don't have to go back any further than that. When Thomas Jefferson, a slaveholder, said that all men are created equal. Well, I think he meant literally men, but he meant literally rich white men. because he didn't mean any other men and he didn't mean any women there. And so, and Jefferson was a deist himself. I mean, you know, he cut out the parts of the Bible literally that he did not agree with. And so if we have people like he and Franklin and so many others who, if you just study anything about them, you will know that they were far from Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson and all those guys like that. And they just looked at life differently, I think more broadly. And so if we have to be a Christian nation to the exclusion of everybody else, that's not being Christian. And so I think that we're beyond that Christian nation, you know, narrative. I think that, again, as I said earlier, our faith ought to come through in our politics. Nobody should have to look at a legislator and wonder whether or not they are a person of faith. That ought to be something that comes through in the way, in the fairness, in the justice, and to a such, you know, the righteousness that comes through in what they propose and what they stand for. And we have people that claim Christianity, but they don't write laws that reflect Jesus, the person who is the object of worship in Christianity. So, you know, if we're going to be Christian, let's be Christian. And Christian is much more broader than this narrow lane that they have us in now. And they have everybody discussing this narrow lane as if this is all that there is to Christianity. But I've been saying for about a month now, I think that a different narrative, a false narrative or false Jesus was created. And this is what many people worship now. It is not who most of us worship. It is not the historical Jesus that we worship. And keep in mind, when Jesus was brought before Pilate, they asked him, you know, who do you want us to release, Jesus or Barabbas? And if you break down Barabbas, that's the Son of God. So they chose the Son of God over the Son of God. And so there's always been a false kind of narrative there. And it's really bad now, because I think so many people that in policy making positions are so far from true Christianity or from reason right now, that all that's reflected in what they're doing and in this mess we see.
Thank you. And I appreciate the reflection on the birth of this country and how this faith had been used in the subjugation of humanity from the very beginning of the creation of the United States. So thank you for saying that. Father Tim?
Well, I'm just, you know, all Christians, people who claim to be of Christian faith, don't all hold the same beliefs necessarily. And growing up here in Oklahoma, as a Catholic, we were a minority when I was growing up. And so when people talk about, you know, we should allow prayer in the schools because we're a Christian nation and we should do this, I can remember as a kid that some of the things that I heard other Christians talking about did not really align with the values that necessarily my Christian faith held. And so, you know, I often think when people bring up that argument about we should have prayer in the schools, like, well, who's going to pray? Which Christian group are you going to allow every group to pray? And so I think that's usually we have seen in the past that whoever has the power, and in some places and in some periods of history that might have been Catholics, but whoever has the power at that time enforces their beliefs upon others as the Christian faith. And so I think that we have to recognize that we live in a pluralist society and that there are even some people of no faith, which are seeing more and more people who call themselves spiritual, but not necessarily of a particular religious tradition. And that somehow we have to acknowledge them and look for the good in everyone and look for those ways that we can work with everyone without necessarily excluding people who are not Christian.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Dr. Davies?
Well, I'm going to start by thanking Reverend Jackson for pointing out that historical fallacy at the heart of this idea that this is a Christian nation and the founders were Christian, because of course, you're exactly right. Thomas Jefferson was certainly not. He was a deist, and many of the founders were also Unitarians. John Adams, for example, and at the time he would have been seen as a heretic, and today, by many of those same people who claim that the founders were Christian, would also call him a heretic. So that has simply been a reimagining of historical foundations. But I would say, within my faith, there is this idea that whether you call it God or the divine or mystery or love, that it is that power that exists in the spaces in between people, in the in the potential for creativity and for new ideas and for synthesis of ideas and for conflict that generates creativity. And if you follow that idea that that is, in a sense, where love directs us, the more diversity we have, the greater potential there is for the flourishing of all of life and of all potential, all divine potential. And if you want to use that in terms of like good versus evil, the opposite of that would be the but. When walls are put up, when divisions are made between people, when some people are silenced, that exactly works in the opposite direction, away from divine potential of what we all have the capacity of becoming. And I know that in the Muslim faith, there's a beautiful parallel to that idea that the divine created diversity specifically so we could learn to talk together as an intentional, not as an accident, not as an, oh darn, too bad. But that's where the beauty is. That's where the mystery is. So it's heartbreaking and incredibly small-minded, I think, to see that diversity is the enemy and that sameness is the good.
Wow, thank you. Yes. All right, now that I've gotten us warmed up a little bit, I want to shift us into kind of a more conversational model. I don't want to call you guys out. You guys hop in and just discuss with one another this next question, because it's definitely a big one. So I just want to ask, how do you see religion being politicized in America right now? And that's a big question. And I see Imad has unmuted, so I'm just going to let y'all go.
Well, my religion has been politicized, been used as a political platform. Unfortunately, I always kid around with my mom every morning when I call her. I said, hey, I'm on the news every day. Not necessarily me personally, but anytime you turn the news, there's a story about Islam banning, religious legislation to ban Sharia law, legislation to, there's a Muslim ban still in effect. My own mother could not come to my own daughter's wedding because she's Syrian. Islamophobia is at all-time high due to the politicizing my faith. That's one aspect of politicizing faith, and the other aspect of politicizing faith, I'll let the other three panels talk about. Promoting certain people as or as certain group, politicizing their faith for favor in the polls. But definitely, we feel as a minority religion, we are less than 2% of the United States population. But if you turn the TV on, you probably think that there was actually a question people asked, what is the percentage of Muslims in America? And if somebody said 25%, said, wow, we're not, we're less than 2%. But nevertheless, when we politicize Islam as the enemy, or we politicize a faith as the enemy of the people, and so on, or Islam hates us. We are on the receiving end of that part. The conversation, continues as people sometimes promote certain candidates as very faithful, very Christians, and so on. So as a minority Muslim, I sure could feel the politicizing of my faith to benefit certain political points with certain people. She said we could jump in, so.
I think it is unfortunate. I mean, I think for me, it's unfortunate that that many times I see in our Catholic faith that we have been allowed to be used in different ways by politicians who are trying to get the vote. And instead of, I mean, I think our leaders are not helpful when we too closely align ourselves with either of the main political parties or candidates, because there are things from both political parties that are important to us as faith. I mean, we would agree that those are important parts of our teachings of our faith, but that when we allow ourselves to be used just to get a vote, that is offensive, and it also we lose our credibility, and as people of faith, again, we've got to be people of action. And so if our actions are hypocritical, then people are going to stop looking at us as faith leaders.
Well, kind of echoing
Jesse, there you go.
I'm sorry, but kind of echoing something that Father Tim said a little while ago. Some of the people that really politicize their faith are the ones that keep demanding prayer back in school, and it's always, whose prayer are you talking about? And I remember we said the Pledge of Allegiance every day, and we prayed in school. They had children do the devotion in school, and that's exclusively Christian. They didn't open it up. They didn't open it up to Jews. They didn't open it up to Muslims or Buddhists or anybody. They didn't open it up to Catholics. It was always a Protestant thing. But then again, I grew up in Mississippi, so it is what it is. But still, as an educator, I work for the Oklahoma City Public Schools. I catch a lot of the Oklahoma City flack and a lot of education flack. And a gentleman told me one day, he said, "But how are you going to teach prayer in schools? You guys can't even teach reading." And I was like, "Oh boy." And but that's always a question. It's always a question. Whose religion are we talking about? But in terms of politicizing that faith, I come at it from just a little bit different angle, and it's because as an African American man, my freedom in this country has been advanced by faith leaders, like for instance Dr. King. And perhaps if we hadn't gone that way, I would be a lot more hesitant to kind of advance that way. But they had to overcome a false image that took all of the justice out of Jesus and made Jesus and just into this ritualistic Jesus that hated everything that they hated and celebrated everything that they celebrated. And so in drawing the line down the sand, and I often tell the congregation at East 6th Street, you have to be careful about drawing lines and drawing circles to keep people out, because you look around and then you end up being isolated yourself, because you've drawn yourself right out of the group, because there are more other people than there are of you. And I think that we deserve a faith that's going to fight for justice and going to be broad. I guess it's just human nature. We tend to, if we have been oppressed, sometimes we tend to oppress others when the shoe is on the other foot. And the idea of dominating and not cooperating is a major problem in the way people interpret the scriptures, particularly the Christian scriptures and our Bible now. They only read themselves as David, never as Goliath. Now they're David when they're facing Goliath, but they're not David when it comes to Uriah and Bathsheba. You know, and when you can pick and choose, and you always read yourself as the hero or the heroine, you're not getting the full scope of what the scriptures say. We're not always on the side of right. We're not always good. The totality of who we are actually lives in the shadows of life and not so much in the black and white. You know, we do get up on the wrong side of the bed. We do snap at people. We do get it wrong sometimes.
Can you think of a way here in Oklahoma City or Oklahoma where you've seen maybe political structures take the Jesus out of Jesus?
Yes. I'm kind of smiling. The legislature had me, the House of Representatives had me to do the invocation for a week a few years ago. And I was supposed to pray Monday through Thursday. Then on Friday, I gave like a 5-minute homily. And I told the speaker at the time, you know, I prayed a very generic prayer. I believe in, you never know who's in the audience. So you pray in a very broad way. And I did that. But on that Friday, I said to him, I said, well, I'm going to, you know, I prayed in a very broad way all this time. I'm going to live my faith now. I'm coming from Matthew 25. I'm talking about Jesus. And he said, amen. And he sat there, and when I finished talking about the separation of the sheep and the goats, and that part of giving people water that thirst did not include the water of Flint, Michigan. Ooh. And I just went through a whole thing. He got quiet and he left. He left the well of the house. And so people have in their mind what they think the gospel is, and they won't deviate from it. And the gospel is what they can master. And they don't understand that, I mean, we can't even fully grasp the idea of God. And so, you know, you can't master everything you need to know about this thing and then beat everybody else over the head with it. That's just not the way it's going to work.
At least they allow you, Reverend Jackson, to go pray.
Yes.
I detect a little hostility there.
I'm happy. I mean, like,
I don't even know if they do that anymore. I guess that's a little Christian privilege. I guess I don't even know if they do that anymore. I might have ruined it for folks.
That wasn't you.
No, it was not you, Reverend Jackson. It was not you. Now they have a house chaplain that does it all the time. So I don't think there's any outside faith leaders that are allowed to do that anymore. And a lot of that has to do with Dr. Enchassi being denied the opportunity to pray in the House of Representatives here in Oklahoma. And OCC was very proud to stand alongside of Imad in that quest to understand why. I will put it that way. And that kind of evolved into a transition there with the House. And Imad, is there anything you wanted to say about what that experience was like for you here in Oklahoma, being denied that opportunity?
Well, in the beginning, I was thinking that it's a form of bureaucracy, that my application somehow, although I was invited before and I prayed before. And yes, Muslims do also invoke Jesus' name when they pray as well. So, and I thought the first time I prayed a few years ago was very balanced. As Reverend Jackson said, you have, when you are at the People's House, you have to use a language that is inclusive. But then when, after a while asking and calling and checking on my application, I received zero information. I was told that it was denied. Why it was denied, I had no idea. Don't want to go through all the details, but you probably know that I was denied just simply based on my faith. And I probably had 99.9% chance of, litigation against the state and against that person, but we chose to take the higher road. OCC came, and we went to that person who actually denied my application, and he ended up resigning, and the whole thing was redone. Actually, there was a double down. The rules were changed after that, saying that only a clergy that are co-religionists to the legislators could pray in the House, and then it backfired, and eventually, I think to fix this whole mess, they just hired a chaplain that he does the prayers all the time. We were promised that we will come back and he will outreach, but we haven't done anything yet.
Boy, Mom, I did ask down there. I said, who else does this? Is it just Protestant ministers? Is it just males? I mean, I asked the questions, and I kind of got to know it was exclusive, and then I looked at them side-eye because I knew that was not really true.
Yeah, that was an interesting experience for all of us that were involved with that. Dr. Davies, do you have anything to say about kind of this politicizing of religion? I want to give you the opportunity to respond to that if you want. You don't have to.
It's just a little thing that it feels like it's the politicization of fear. Because it's not full, if you will, the full totality of a religion. It is picking it, as Reverend Jackson was saying as well, it's this picking and choosing, and it seems to be that people in power who want to use that power not to generate more power of, in which more people have a voice, more people have a role to play, but power over, where they're wanting to use others to have power over them, that their unique tool is not religion per se, but fear. And so they find within certain faiths the points of fear, and they pick at those and they pick at those, so that those points overwhelm the beauty and the power and the potential that's within those faiths. And I think it means that all of us, including those of us who think of ourselves as being in more progressive and liberal faiths, to be aware of that. Are our fears being used against us? Because it's not just the right that does this. It's the potential of anybody from any political side who can use fear for their own gain. So I think we all need to be very aware of that.
Yeah. And something that just kind of, this wasn't one of the questions that I pre-gamed with you all, so forgive me. But something that I've been doing a lot of reflecting on, especially in this political season, is the difference between politics, as far as like the social gospel goes and the ministry of Jesus or Muhammad or our key religious figures, and partisanship. Because I feel like a lot of the narrative has become politics is partisanship, if that makes sense. And I wonder what you all think. How do we as faith leaders begin to uncouple those concepts? Because I feel like that's vital to civility and conversation around these topics, is untangling the partisanship from political conversation and dialogue. So let me just toss that one out, because I feel like that's going to be vital to progressing forward.
I'm gonna let y'all handle that a lot better than me. I've been so frustrated with this that I've been more forceful, and the whole idea of the social gospel, and I've always rejected that because that means that there's another kind of gospel that implies there's another kind of gospel, and when it's really not, it's just the gospel. If you read and you study and you imitate what Jesus demonstrated, you know, if you're a Christian, if you imitate what Jesus did, it's social by what it is, and I don't think that doing what Jesus did while claiming Christianity certainly it is out of the box, and just like Imam said, you know, I mean, Muslims call on Jesus and recognize Jesus and Jesus' teaching because those teachings are universal. They're absolutely universal. They're not, you know, exclusive to who Christians claim to be. But I think so many Christians think that they are exclusive and that they have it right and no one else has it right. I think that's the main issue that we face. And you know, whatever God has worked out with everybody else is what God has worked out with them. I I was 19 once. I got enough to repent for. So I'm trying to, you know, I can't worry about everybody else right now, and I'm too busy trying to get my salvation, you know, right, and do the things that I need to do to try to make this world more livable, than try to force somebody else into something. So let's just put it out there what Jesus did, and then people make the choice. As far as I'm concerned, that's the way I do it. So I have not been uh, gentle in that way as I should have been.
Father Tim, did you want to say something?
Well, I was
Thinking about it.
as Reverend Jackson was talking that, you know, so, you know, it seems to me that our faith calls for us to realize that we don't just save ourselves, that we're called to help save everyone. I mean, we can't just be about our own salvation, but that doesn't mean that we have to force our teachings on everybody, but that we look for, like, one of the, you know, our foundations of our teachings of our church is the common good, and that, you know, it's important for us to see that what we do and what we build, what kind of political society we build and structures we build, helps everybody to have fullness of life, and that we shouldn't deny that to anybody. But that doesn't mean that they all have to become Catholic. Now, for some people, they would say that that's, you know, heresy, you know, but I think, you know, my understanding of, you know, the Christian message is that we are called to work and stand beside everyone to help everyone to experience the fullness of God's kingdom. And we do that by working with everybody and trying to assure that every human life has that opportunity to share in that. Say it. Say it.
I'll just say this question is particularly really relevant to me, because as Unitarian Universalists, this is a question we're grappling with. We're a non-creedal faith, which means there's no one thing you need to believe about the divine to be a Unitarian Universalist. We have Buddhist UUs, Jewish UUs, Christian UUs, pagan, lots of humanists and atheists. They all live together, right, in this beautiful experiment of learning how to respect each other and hold each other up and be in covenant with one another. What holds us together is our principles and our values and our relationships, not this creedal idea. And we have Democrat and Republican UUs. And we've worked very hard to be nonpartisan as a reflection of that openness. But something has changed within the last few years that has pushed us, I think, beyond a place of politics and partisanship. It is one thing, I think, for faith leaders to weigh in on different policies, right? Tax law, whatever it might be. But when we know that people are being hurt, when we know that children's parents are being sent to other countries and they've been lost, over 500 children lost. When we see so many Black men, Black women in their own beds, in their own homes, killed with nothing that comes of it legally. When we see when we hear Supreme Court justices talking about if they get the chance, they're going to roll back marriage equality. These kinds of things have real repercussions, not just on people's spiritual lives, but on their bodies. And that's beyond politics. If we are not fighting for those people's lives, we are not doing the work of our faith. And so that for me has what the line is. It's one thing when it's political power structures, things like that. But when it's people's lives, we are absolutely compelled to do something about that and to step in and to speak out against the oppression and the atrocity. So.
That was beautifully said. Beautifully said. And so then how do people of faith, any faith, how do we engage in political life? What does that look like?
Well, I think we call out, as Reverend Diana said, I think we call out any political leader that seems to be promoting anything that we think that is contrary to life. And I mean, we have to understand again that we live in this pluralist society, but that if my faith tells me that, separating children from their parents and doing crazy things is absolutely damaging, then if a person is promoting that, I have to call out that person and also say to my community, I don't know if you all are aware of this, but this is contrary to our belief. Now, again, other people may feel differently about that, but I don't, it's hard for me to understand how they can. And that's where I have to sit back and say, take a moment, Tim, and be patient, because you're not the only guy in the room.
Let me just give you some statistics. My mosque, I have 72 ethnicity, 72 from 42 different countries. So when we talk about politics, I have all the Middle Eastern politics in my mosque, all the India, Pakistan politics in my mosque, all the, so my role as an imam is to, I know what Father Tim was trying to say is somehow trying to keep the people together in a sense that, we are American Muslims, so let's concentrate on local agenda. So that's hard. Having said that, Dr. Davies, as faith supposed to give us, I gave a sermon one time, I called it GPS, God Positioning System, right? So there's a compass within each one of us, regardless of faith or lack of faith or no faith. There is a compass within each one of us that says this is right and this is not right. Now, I have to say that from a Muslim perspective, that the Imam have more say so in the direction of the congregation. So we're more vocal on issues, especially those issues that have to do with God positioning system. that our GPS is saying recalculating all the time, and we have to push reset. And the Imam, I'm not going to say the preacher or the rabbi, but the Imam is that person who push reset button and tell their congregation, well, separating children is wrong. Black lives do matter. Stand up for the poor, stand up for the needy, and so on and so forth. Yes, at the same time, we're humans, and we could see the suffering of other humans. And if that faith, as I said in the beginning, does not manifest itself into action, now, how do you do that? As Dr. Davies says, how do you do that without stepping on people's toe? Well, let me tell you something. I know I'm the only non-Christian sitting here today. I don't think Jesus, I don't think Jesus really did step on people's toes.
Yes, he did.
That is the Jesus I know. That's what he did. He stepped on people's toes because when the law is divine and the divine is working through you through your GPS system, you have to say something. You have to do something. I know preachers who lost their jobs. I know people who but the thing is, when we became a people of God, we do God's business. And God positioning system require for us sometimes to step on people's toes. My beard is not white, because I'm old. Well, I am old, but I struggle internally a lot more than I struggle externally.
Well, can I ask a question about that? That I think that's an interesting idea, but sometimes I wonder about particular, and I know this is my own personal issue that I'm gonna have to speak to the Creator about and be judged about. But sometimes I wonder what the heck is wrong with some of these people's GPS or whatever. Do they really have one? I'm serious. I mean, I look at something like, why is it that this person cannot see the obvious damage that this is doing to people? And how do we work with that?
It's the virus we call Satan there that goes in the system and make people deviate from the path. But my job is to deliver the message, and I try to do that every single week. Every single what I say on the pulpit is what I do in my life is what I do. Yeah. I cannot tell you how many death threats I get, and sometimes from co-religionists. So when blessed, so when we get death threats from from the co-religionist and from people outside your faith, you're probably on the right path, I think.
Well, in our section of Christianity, Disciples of Christ, we have something that we call the priesthood of all believers. It's a sort of an equality there, in that even though I may be in the role as preacher or pastor, it doesn't make me better in the eyes, the Creator, than anybody else. And that we all are called, we all have duties to do. And I think that there are some issues that are beyond our faith, actually, and just go to the human in us. Because before we were anything else, we were human. Before we knew we were anything else in this world, we were human. And at the base of our humanness, there are just some things that at the core, if you do have a moral compass, and everybody doesn't, and that's a frustrating thing to me, and that's something that other people won't say. A lot of folks won't say, but there are folks walking that do not appear to have a moral compass at all. And those are the ones that are all right with children in cages and separating. Those are the ones that are all right with so many Black people being killed, with so many poor people being killed, but Native American land being misused and infringed on. The only rights that matter are theirs, and they talk about rights and they never talk about responsibilities. You know, there's a humanness that ought to go beyond uh, even our faith. And I think God gave us all this humanness and this connectivity, as Imam talked about, and Dr. Davies talked about, in Islam earlier, and this diversity in us that, we are all created in that image. And as believers, whether we think those who are atheists or agnostic believe that or not, that still does not exclude them from creation. I mean, we have an obligation, I believe, to deal with one another on that human level. And I would rather deal with you as a human before I try to preach to you. As a matter of fact, I may not even preach to you. It will be dealing on the human level and just trying to make you like me, trying to be the best people that we can possibly be.
Can I just jump in? I just need to make a little clarification. So Unitarian Universalism grew out of Christianity, but I, for example, am not a Christian. I am a humanist, religious naturalist, and we have, I would say it's in our particular congregation, the majority would identify themselves as non-Christian. Okay. Most would be practicing of the earth-based religion or spirituality or Buddhist or atheism. So we exactly are getting at this idea that Reverend Jackson is talking about, that it doesn't even require necessarily a belief in a supernatural or divine to be kind to each other, to have a moral compass, to be ethical. Humanity has that within us. That is our capacity as human beings. And I wonder about those folks who have lost that capacity, how traumatized they must be, how much historical trauma they are carrying in their bodies to not be able to feel the pain of watching a child screaming, to not be able to feel the pain of watching a Black mother weeping as her child lays bleeding out on the street for hours. Something is wrong. And for me, that has to do with trauma that's deeply, deeply embedded in cultures and in individuals and sometimes in traditions. So, sorry, I just wanted to, I'm not a Christian. I needed to point that out.
We could call that conscience without calling, conscience, human conscience. Confucius had this idea. One time he held a baby above a well, and everybody gathered. He said, if I drop this baby in the well, how many of you will be distressed? And everybody raised their hand, the male, the female, the older, the young, the religious, and the secular. I cried when Old Yeller was shot, and I was millions, thousands of miles away from all of y'all. Some of you, Father Tim, do you know who Old Yeller is? You're looking at me like you don't know.
What's the dog? It was a dog. Was it a dog or a horse? It was a dog. Okay.
It was a dog.
Great book.
I don't think I saw that movie. Anyway.
Sometimes I say that to my college student children. How many of you cried when Old Yeller, and everybody looking at me like, oh my gosh, I'm old. But whatever you want to call it, from my perspective, faith, the first address in the Quran, humanity. So God was talking to the human. So faith or conscience, whatever you want to call it, connects you with your humanity. God says he scans our heart and not the way we look. So a conscience, if somebody loses their conscience and the moral compass, whatever you want to call it, you're absolutely right. Those people are miserable. However, Thanksgiving is coming, and Uncle Bob gonna show up, and all the family members gonna show up. I have a daughter-in-law who is Methodist, and a daughter-in-law who is Cheyenne, Columbus Day, Indigenous Peoples Day. And I always tell people, and I close my book with that. I said, at the end of the day, we all pray and we all come together because we're family, because everybody have a seat at the table. And the whole idea of this, there's a lot of division out there, and I know it's kind of hard for us not to take a stand, but we do take a stand in a way. We're trying to bring people together. November 3rd is going to pass, and what's going to happen after that is going to be up to many faith leaders to bring people together, despite the pain or the joy, whatever it is. Somebody going to have pain, somebody going to have joy, and the only way we could look at it is from a humanistic perspective. Right. There's no Christian water, there's no Jewish water, there's no Republican air, there's no Democratic toxic waste. We're all in this together. We're all in this together, and I'm hoping that as we move forward, that we heal.
Amen.
You all are so sensational, and I want to pick up before we close and quote one of our fellow clergy who says this all the time, Reverend Lori Walkie, who we know, says, all of us need all of us to make it. And that is 100% true. We truly are one human community who need to be living into that. So we have 3.5 minutes. What would you like to say to our viewers this evening as we move into this very heated final few weeks of this political season? Father Tim, do you want to go first, just real quick?
Well, I mean, I was very much inspired by what the Imam just said, because this weekend's scripture for us, the gospel, is what's the most important commandment? And love God and love your neighbor. And I'm just thinking, like, okay, I need to talk about the fact that no matter what happens, we're all in this together. And that's why we need to stick together and look toward each other for support and help.
Ditto.
I would say there's a God divine wisdom behind everything. And let's not look at closed doors, because when God closed a door due to his wisdom, he'll open many other doors through his mercy.
Yeah.
So, it's very human to keep looking at that closed door, and that somehow focus our attention on that closed door so much that we don't just turn a little bit to the side and see all these other big doors that have been opened to us. Repelling hate with love is a formula that I have been dealing with all throughout my life. And hateful people who showed up to my food pantry to protest us with guns, we turned around and we saved their lives literally with our free clinic or with our food. They became our volunteers and they became our security guards. So just look at those open doors as we go forward.
So wonderful. Reverend Jackson.
I'm trying my best to have hope. I have a faith of hope, and I can't be in the position that I am if I lose all hope. So I get down from time to time. I get frustrated from time to time, but I cannot lose hope in humanity. No matter how crazy we get sometimes, I cannot lose hope. I must keep hoping.
Dr. Davies, any closing thoughts?
No, I just love all of the ideas that have been shared here, and the same thing, holding on to hope, and that we have it. We don't have to wait for some future leaders or people who are going to be perfect or allies that are going to agree with us in every single thing. We are what we have, and we're enough.
Thank you to each and every one of you for doing this tonight. Thanks for the wonderful conversation and really showing everyone how we can do this with one another. So as Father Tim said, the gospel message for this weekend is to love God and love your neighbor. And I think that is the perfect way to end this conversation. If you're going to watch the debate, prayers for sanity and deep breaths. And all of us need all of us to make it. Blessings and have a wonderful evening. Thank you all.
Bye.